Hi, Black Hollywood Live fans. Today we are talking Supreme Court battle, accountability for police and sheriff, a truly disarmed robber, and could the feds come knocking down your door to get repaid for federal student loans? That and more on today's Justice is Served.
You are tuned in to Black Hollywood Lives. Justice is served.
I just love this song.
All right, hello and welcome to Black Hollywood Live's Justice is Served, where we discuss the latest in legal news every week here with me, Chelsea Galicia. My co-hosts are Shaka Smith. God, I still do that every time I want to call him by his Twitter name, Shaka Strong. I love that. And Abron, thank you for joining me today. We had a massive legal shakeup this weekend. Can't wait to get to that. And so a lot happened over the last week that I want to get straight into. Shall we begin?
Yes.
Let's do this. Okay, so you may have heard over the weekend that a Supreme Court justice died unexpectedly. His name was Antonin Scalia. And any lawyer that you know was shocked and thinking this was jaw-dropping news, and most people have no idea really who this man is and why it matters so much to their life.
Right.
So for a second, we just need to just talk about the massive impact of this one man's death. Like, any person that's gone to law school in the last 30 years, like, this guy is a celebrity in law school, right? You read about his opinions. They're always very colorful, controversial, and definitely conservative.
He was definitely someone that played to your emotions. When you read his opinions, you might just want to stand up and just walk out just after reading some of his opinions. So
and we have talked about some of the statements he's made recently in questioning about an affirmative action case. He asked somebody, well, maybe we shouldn't be pushing black students into schools that are faster than they can keep up with, making statements along those lines. So I thought that The Onion had the best headline about his death when they said, Justice Scalia dies after a 30-year battle with social progress.
But I would say, though, he was a very brilliant jurist, and he stood for, in the conservative movement, his brilliance was something that you could admire because it was very intelligent, it was very thought out. So whether or not you agreed with him, he did have a very consistent framework for what he did. And so I think you're going to see a huge shift now. With where we are.
Yeah, I absolutely. But before we get to the shift, interesting to know you had a run-in with Justice Scalia.
Oh yeah, I got the opportunity to meet him while I was in law school. Went to George Mason, was a very conservative law school, and just a very affable individual.
Affable.
Yeah.
That's the best we can. Okay. But yeah, so Shaka's like, oh, poor guy. And meanwhile, BJ and I are like, oh my gosh.
He definitely wasn't I mean, you hate to see anyone pass away, but, obviously he definitely wasn't my favorite, Yeah,
I would say for the future of the court and for the way things might go in this country, that part I was somewhat excited for.
I was relieved, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, because there are some really pivotal, crucial cases that were like on the docket that they had been heard, and we were going to find out what he and the rest of the justices thought, and this was going to make, really crucial law of the land.
Yeah.
So some of those cases have to deal with abortion, affirmative action, President Obama's executive powers regarding immigration. What else do we have? There was some campaign finance reform. There were some really big, meaty cases that were in the midst of being decided.
Yeah, and I think for most people, I don't know if they understand that the court was really falling 5-4 for many of the decisions. They were kind of divided along ideological lines. Every now and then I think you had Kennedy join the other side. But so this is a huge shakeup because now it's going to tip the scales possibly in favor of the liberal justices.
Right. So cases that we before probably would have gone the more conservative route, we don't know now anymore. Right. And now this has become a huge political issue with some Republican senators promising to withhold a vote. So how it works now is that the president appoints somebody, anybody. Even Shaka's like, hey, I could get a call any day now.
Yeah, because right now they are in recess. And so the president has the power to do a recess appointment. And so he can appoint anyone without confirmation if he does it before the 22nd. But I think he's indicated that he would not do that.
Right.
He wanted to do something in due time.
So generally the way it works is the president nominates somebody and then the Supreme Court has to affirm that by a simple majority, 50, or even like 49, and then the vice president would get to vote and cause a majority. And that's it. So the Republicans saying that we're not going to for sure affirm anybody that the president nominates is pretty unprecedented, even though they pointed fingers at President Obama for doing something similar.
Yeah. And I wonder if they may have been trying to bait him into a recess appointment, because I think you would have had a lot of conservatives up in arms and may have produced a greater turnout for the presidential election, but who knows? Yeah,
so this is something really to watch, and we will definitely be talking a lot about whoever the nominee is. Now everybody's just sort of in rumorville about who it might be. Yeah. BJ, any ideas?
Well, I mean, you have a lot of talk about Loretta Lynch, who at this time is the U.S. Attorney General.
First African American.
Yes, first African American. You also have Kamala Harris, who is the California Attorney General.
Right.
Someone who I am feel very passionate about in terms of what she stands for.
She's definitely progressive.
Yes, very progressive. But she was also a very strong prosecutor as well. And obviously, I kind of reside on the defense side of things, but I definitely like what she stands for. And there's probably about 5 or 6 individuals who I think would possibly be notable. I know President Obama.
I think I heard this morning that Sri Srinavan, and forgive me, I'm probably butchering the name. I know I'm butchering the name, but I think he has risen to the top of the list, an Indian American. For the Supreme Court.
And he clerked for Sandra Day O'Connor as well.
Yeah,
so.
And I think he held post under George W. Bush and under the Obama administration as well.
Yeah, and we can't really tell based on the history of who he's represented, sort of which side he might fall on.
Yeah.
It doesn't really lend itself to say, oh, this guy's clearly conservative or liberal at all. So
and I think he was just confirmed with a couple years ago with a 97 or 93 and 0 vote, right?
Right.
Is that correct? So.
And then there's a whole lot of talk about, well, fine, why don't we let the Republicans delay it, and then we'll let Bernie or Hillary appoint President Obama to the Supreme Court. The likelihood of that happening is about
very small, but who knows?
Extremely small.
It's fun to talk about, some creative ideas like that, but unlikely to happen.
Right. And I think it's important to note, so going forward now, the Supreme Court's a man down, so a lot of decisions could be left at 4-4. When the decision is 4-4, then basically the appellate court that last heard the case, that ruling stands. And so I think you're going to see, what you definitely will see, is 9 out of the 13 circuits, I believe, for the majority of judges, were nominated by Democrats. So you're going to see a lot of liberal decisions probably stand, in the wake of this.
Yeah, we shall see. And we'll definitely tell you about whatever is next. But there will definitely be a time in 10 years from now when we all remember the day that Scalia died, and then the court changed composition, and very likely we will have just a different theme of the cases, the decisions that are made. Perhaps more social progress will be made now. Fingers crossed, please. Okay. All right, so let's move on to another huge jaw-dropping story. This one we actually covered last year a bit, because we talked about the Undersheriff Tanaka, who was arrested, indicted for corruption. And at the time, we were thinking, well, did it go all the way to the top? Did Sheriff Baca know about this? And now we know the truth is, yeah, he did.
Yeah. He did. And I mean, I remember that show, and I think I stated then there was no way possible that he could not have known. And I'm a lot upset at what took place in terms of him not serving a sufficient prison sentence. He doesn't have to testify against anyone else.
Yeah, so this is really, the way that this has gone down is really uncool. So the FBI was investigating the jails because of corruption, mistreatment, civil rights violations, I mean, really basic, the corruption that we all think about. I mean, it's kind of like Orange is the New Black, style times, 100. That's the kind of stuff that the FBI was investigating. And when the sheriff's department got word that there was an FBI investigation, they started to do things to cover up.
Yeah.
Like there was an FBI informant that was in the jail, and they ended up moving that guy around so that the FBI could sort of lost track of him.
And under different names. They were putting them under different names.
Right. So there was the question was was there a intentional interference, obstruction of justice,
and the intimidation of the FBI investigator, where they actually they were informed to do everything they could to thwart her investigation, save for putting her in custody.
And he sent her. I mean, he sent them to her home.
To intimidate her.
To intimidate her and threaten her with arrest.
Right. So all of that was revealed when he agreed to plead guilty to lying to investigators. And so we had heard that he was going to plead guilty, and he officially pled guilty this morning. So what he is pleading guilty to is simply lying to investigators, which, is bad. And this is how we know that there was the FBI investigator that was intimidated, and how there was that witness who was shuffled around and hidden, things of that nature. The deal that he cut, though, is infuriating, at least to me.
Yeah.
So he will serve no more than 6 months in jail, and he gets to keep his $300,000 plus per year pension because of the fact that this lying took place in 2014, which I believe after he left. And the law says that your pension is cut from the date of your misdeed, your infraction, your crime. So because he didn't commit this crime until after he was done and out, and he had, his pension had sort of like vested, that doesn't get touched at all. He has not, as I've seen so far, been charged with any of the underlying corruption that's at the investigation.
I think we may see some additional charges, and I definitely think you'll see a lot of civil suits. So I don't think this is over for Bach. I don't think he gets to just kind of retire and keep his pension and have a good time.
And if he only gets probation, oh my God, I might, justice will definitely be unserved. I mean,
these are the kind of issues that we've talked about for years, that where prisoners have reported these type of abuses, these types of behaviors, and people have shafted these statements by simply calling them conspiracy theories. And these are stuff that you hate to see it have to come to the limelight or come to the forefront in this manner, and not years ago when this stuff was taking place. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is not to mention the countless of years that he spent overseeing.
Yeah, he was the sheriff for 15 years. He was reelected 4 times. I mean, I kind of was like, dang, what we as voters should have known. This is a really just a miscarriage of justice.
But I think it's a testament that we need more oversight in that process. Yeah,
absolutely. So along the same lines as corruption in the jails, there's also been corruption in prison. The FBI has arrested 46 former and current correction officers at various prisons in the state of Georgia for being involved with things like drug trade, help carrying out, like I think one was like a kidnapping of somebody on the outside, laundering money, smuggling in contraband. 46 officers. Do you think that this is the tip of the iceberg, or is this the iceberg now that we're getting to?
Tip of the iceberg. I mean, all of this stuff is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's many cases that will just remain under the rug, and you just will never uncover it. Nobody will ever speak about it, or may just never come to light. But I think slowly but surely, as the wheels begin to turn, as we've seen over the last year or so, I think we'll kind of get a little bit more insight, and we'll start to see more officers, and more importantly, the institution changing in a manner that it should.
I think we just have a culture of not listening to people that we believe are criminals, or we put in a different light, and putting those that kind of police them above reproach. I think we're seeing that break down, and that idea, once it breaks down, starts to breed change.
Yeah. Right, and will only change though if we as citizens keep pressure on it by looking at these, by being informed of the stories.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to that statement that the officer made, I forget his name now, and or the prosecutor made in Making a Murderer, where he was talking about the conspiracy, or where he said it was impossible, completely impossible and idiotic to think that the police officers could actually sabotage an investigation and pin it on Mr. Avery. And this is what we're really dealing with here. We're dealing with faulty police officers, faulty actions within a police department, and like you just stated, that as a general public, we have been conditioned essentially to just believe like, oh, these guys are criminals, we can't listen to anything, their word is invalid.
Right. And I think covering stories like the officer who went around raping women with criminal histories, who are all minorities and not used to having a voice, not being taken seriously.
It underscores that culture.
Right. So we all got to just stay on it so that we can keep seeing more of these stories. I mean, it's like you don't want to see more of these stories, but that they have to be.
And they're out there, so you have to report on them and find them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And then some people call this holding an officer accountable. Some people see this as a miscarriage of justice. The conviction of police officer Peter Liang. So he shot an unarmed man in a dark stairwell. He was a rookie going down a stairwell. He had his finger on the trigger, didn't realize like how just a little small movement would pull the trigger, and so he shot and killed Akai Gurley in that stairwell. So he faced trial and was convicted of manslaughter. Is this a story of police are now being held accountable, or is this the story of another minority police officer being sort of scapegoated?
Well, this is a tough one. Anytime a police officer is held accountable for a shooting, I think it's a positive thing. I think it's a positive step in the right direction, regardless of what race the police officer is. I think any officer seeing someone being held accountable for what might be bad behavior is a good thing. Whether or not this is mitigated by the fact that he was convicted because he was Asian, and in other different scenarios because the police were white, they were not convicted, is another story. And I think it is troubling when you look at the host of cases where people haven't even been indicted.
Right, for similar things where this guy said it was basically an accident, and he wasn't well trained, and there was a lot of situations that were similar to other officers who have killed people and have not been charged at all.
There was another case where there was a white officer, and I believe this was in New York, where the officer was in an apartment complex, or what do you call it?
Housing project?
A housing project. And his gun went off. He had his finger on the trigger as well. He accidentally shot someone, and it was completely an accident. You can clearly tell based upon the facts that I read that it seemed to be an accident. He was a white officer. He got off. It's a very similar case to this one, and he got off. Now, those are similar cases, and of course, Shaka, I agree. This is the question is a tough question because you don't want to just say but the facts are before us. The evidence is before. We've seen case after case. Eric Garner, where people are getting choked with no weapon, choked to death, and there are nobody's being prosecuted, nobody's going to jail. So for this situation to take place, and of course I agree that something needed to take place, I think, but it still shows us here that there are some injustices that are taking place based upon race. And it's not that he's been prosecuted maybe because he's Asian, but he's just been prosecuted because he's not white. And
right, that there some of the a Chinese organization wanted to point out and say that blacks and Latinos and Asians are all on the sort of one side. So I mean,
but that's very important because we talked about this before about some hate groups who have been at Black Lives Matters movements. And I remember one time we talked about on the show where it was an Asian and 2 whites, and how various different ethnicities actually, typically when they come to this country, coincide with white privilege or would take place, white social norms, I should say. But, you know, we see a situation here where the Chinese organizations are reaching out to say, look, we are a minority as well.
Yeah.
Well, we need to step back and understand that, hey, when people are out here marching and people are saying, hey, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, again, as we talked about before, it does not mean that no one else matters at all. It just means that, hey, I have to shout Black Lives Matter because I'm being treated like I don't. And so when that happens, I need to see Asians, I need to see Latinos, I need to see everyone out there, because as you can see here, the facts and the trickle down effect will come, and it's going to hit your door. And now you're looking at us like, hey, we're all in the same boat. Well, we need to make sure we marching and we actually sitting at the halls of justice together.
Yeah.
And what I think is a little bit more troubling is that he was claiming incompetence. He was saying that he was not trained very well, and that the academy instructor gave him all the answers to the CPR exam.
Right.
And I think that's part of a problem where they're not just not training them well, they're not vetting them well when they come in. And so, you know, we're very big with our police officers and we give them a lot of respect. And I think that respect that we give them should be reflected in the choosing of who becomes an officer.
Or what is this training about that they're being given the answers?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, this is, we've talked a lot. We need better training. And hopefully this is perhaps embarrassing enough for the department where they are like, okay, fine. Because that's what the mother of the victim wants. She wants the NYPD to undergo better training.
Yeah.
But I mean, sad story either way.
So what does that training look like? I mean, that's the question.
This guy was saying he wasn't even trained well in CPR. So once he shot the man, he couldn't even help him because he wasn't trained properly.
But I would rather, of course, I definitely would like to see police trained in CPR. But I would rather at this point, because we have so many mishaps in other areas of their training, we need to be focused on not shooting and not being put in a position to where you have your finger on a gun, on a trigger, and you shouldn't be.
Well, I think he was also, one of the issues was that he had his trigger on the gun and it shouldn't have been on the gun. So he's also saying that protocol was something he didn't know as well.
To not have his finger
on
already,
the trigger, on the trigger when he's,
going through a dark stairwell. I mean, I can imagine.
If there is one piece of training that I would figure that every officer would pay attention to, will receive, and at the very least pay attention to, is anything that involves the use of his weapon.
That's why I think this case is so troublesome, is the assertion that they're not being trained well enough to go out in these situations, and the training is resulting in the loss of other people's lives. Like, that's,
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's turn to, I don't know, this is either a funny story or...
I think it's a pretty funny story, actually.
Yeah.
myself.
All right, so this is our story about a truly disarmed robber. So a 17-year-old guy from Brooklyn made a deal with a guy on Craigslist to buy some Air Jordans from him.
Right.
So this is caught on video. I'm not sure if we have it. Do we have it?
Yeah, we have this video, I believe, if we could show that.
All right, cool. So let me line this up. So they connect over Craigslist about these shoes, $190. And I mean, my shoes, $190. Okay, anyways, I could go on for a little bit about that. All right, so
Well, we've seen. See, that's the thing about these shoes, and if those of you who are watching don't understand, what's really going on here. You get those lines of people, and we've heard for years people getting stabbed at the stores for purchasing.
I can't believe Michael Jordan wants to be a part of this.
Well,
I think it's making a lot of money.
Yeah,
I know, but come on, how much money is enough money when people are dying over the silly shoes?
At a certain point, he's just selling a product.
Yeah,
these people are not behaving in the right manner.
But why are they being $190? How much do those shoes really cost?
It was alleged that he was that he was selling it for $190. It was also another story that was $490, which is more reasonable, which makes more sense for these shoes.
Yeah.
So what people typically do is they purchase these shoes and then they resell them for about 4 times the amount, and that's what was taking place here. Is him, they met up on the curbside, and we saw them get into the car together, right?
So the young man, 17-year-old, he gets into the car where he allegedly pulls out a gun. And you can't see that because you can't see into the car with the video. But apparently pulls a gun and tells the guy, you're going to do exactly what I want, or I'm going to, shoot you. And some reports are that he actually pulled the trigger, but
it just misfired. It didn't go off.
Right.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't read that.
So the kid jumps out of the car with the gun and the shoes and goes walking down the street. And the driver appears to pull away, and then he makes a sudden U-turn, and you see the kid sort of like at the top of the screen, like just get plowed into by the driver of the car. And what happens that you can't see very well in the video is that the kid's arm gets severed off. The one holding the gun and the shoes gets severed off below the elbow. But that doesn't stop the kid. He keeps running. He tries to get on a bus. The bus driver refuses to let him on or demands that he get off. And then kid tries to run and he just passes out.
And the guy pulled him off the bus.
The guy pulled him off the bus.
He put him off the bus, but he's running with one arm at this point.
And people are yelling like, "Hey, stop running! Your arm's bleeding out!" All over a pair of shoes.
Right.
Now, the shocking or not shocking that the driver of the car, who is a 39-year-old, let's see, Philippe. I want to get his name right. Where does this go? Philippe Pierre is charged with attempted murder.
Yeah.
The kid, though, is also charged with robbery and
armed and I believe the firearm possession.
All right, cool. Let's roll it.
So you can see here. This is the kid who's actually at the car.
Zachary
and he'll
Sam.
step inside the SUV here. And apparently at this point, and you won't be able to see it, but during that portion is when he allegedly pulled the gun out. And you can see the SUV slowly pull away as if he's leaving. And then he turns around here. And then you should see another clip right there when he runs over there. And so you can see he ran him over. And like Chelsea said.
One report I read saw that the driver, Pierre, saw the kid reach back to his waistband perhaps to pull out the gun again. So the driver ducked and then just kept going. And that's...
I don't know. It's hard to see that here. But what I will say is from my angle, from my eyes, it seems like... I don't know if after he just thought he got a clean robbery and this guy was just going to go on about his day, but it seems like he wasn't paying attention to even see if he was going to turn around. So I don't know, if he was reaching for his gun, because it seems like he wasn't even paying attention to me.
Right. So the doctors were actually able to reattach the arm. I'm not sure how functional.
They're not sure if it took yet.
Yeah. But so now the question is, for sure... Let's just handle the kid first. I believe it's fair of the robbery charge and the weapon, right? No controversy about that.
Right.
The more controversial charge, I believe, is the attempted murder charge for the driver.
Yeah. Because most people, when they see this, and this is from maybe a layperson's perspective, they'll see it as what the driver did, as something kind of vicious, but nothing wrong. He was defending himself, essentially.
And it almost seemed kind of poetic justice, right?
Right. And I think that's where the general public will get caught in this, but that's just not how the law works.
Well, I don't see how attempted murder is the correct charge. So I know the Pierre's family is very upset about this. They were in court. They were all sobbing, shocked that he was charged with anything. I think he perhaps, as long as the prosecution sticks with the attempted murder charge, I think he will get off because this is the wrong charge.
Yeah. I don't know that he'll get off. I had a case similar to this where, the defendant was threatened with a knife, with his life with a knife. The guy walked off, and then a few minutes later, the defendant had a lead pipe and, beat the heck out of this guy. And when I spoke to the defendant, he thought that was self-defense. And he said, here's the case. I don't know why I'm in here. It's self-defense.
Right. And most people do.
And most people think that's self-defense. But the problem here is that cooling off period.
Exactly.
If there's ever a cooling off period, and then you go and attack that person that may have incited you enraged you, that cooling off period now makes you liable
But
for whatever you do.
that's for
voluntary
manslaughter.
And so for voluntary manslaughter.
So that's what I think that's what the charge should be is attempted. I mean, it sounds like a legal fiction, and I'm not even sure it exists in New York. It does in California. Attempted
vehicular manslaughter,
involuntary manslaughter.
Wow.
Good guess. Good
Well,
guess.
no, it's voluntary manslaughter.
Yeah.
Right. But attempted voluntary manslaughter.
Right. Exactly.
So
at what point does it become premeditated? Because if he drove off and he was of sound mind and I'm away safe, I'm no longer, my life is no longer a threat.
Well, premeditated itself is a term of art. And so what you're talking about, I think what you're talking about is just the intent. At what point did he actually have the intent to kill him? And that's where you get the charge of attempted murder. That's why I think it's
attempted murder, because they determined that he had enough time when he turned that car around to decide, I'm going to take this guy's life.
I don't think so. I think I could, imagining myself in this situation, somebody pulls a gun on me. In that moment, your adrenaline takes over. You think your life might be over, especially if he tried to pull the trigger and it didn't go off. Right. So then at first you're just stunned. You're driving off, and then. But how many times does this happen to you? Something happens in a moment. You sort of freak out, and then a second passes, and you're okay. And then there's a second wave of holy shit! The reality of what just happened sets in, and another surge of adrenaline goes, and that's why I think it makes sense that the guy turned around.
But the way a heat of passion argument, because under voluntary manslaughter, you can mitigate a charge from attempted murder, or excuse me, from murder to voluntary manslaughter under heat of passion. Heat of passion, which, and in this instance, would be considered under the quarrel argument, right? So there was a quarrel, he had a gun to him. However, under a heat of passion defense, there cannot be a cooling off period, which is what Shaka talked about.
And that's the issue, is whether that time between when he drove off and made the U-turn, whether that is a sufficient cooling off period.
When you describe that second wave of rage, unfortunately, that would then be.
Well, in some jurisdictions, they allow for that second wave. However, there's been cases where, for instance, something happened where I believe at the court date they saw the victim or the defendant, and it reignited, and the court has ruled before that is effectively reinitiating that heat of passion.
So, I mean, how many seconds?
But in this case, nothing happened.
To me, what I saw there
was 4 seconds, 5 seconds.
It was longer than I remembered. So as I just watched it now, that's why it seemed even a little bit more valid. It seemed a lot longer. The guy walks out. The thing makes a long U-turn.
That's not going to hold. Personally, I don't believe that's going to hold as a heat of passion defense. This guy got out of the vehicle. He walked around the vehicle.
He walked across
the street.
Yeah.
He took his vehicle out of park. He drove up to a stop sign, made a U-turn, and ran this young man down.
If he would have hit him right as he got out of the vehicle, then
it would have been a different story.
Well, what about the fact that he severed his arm, but he didn't hurt the guy badly enough, because the guy, he didn't inflict grave bodily harm, physical.
It's no defense to attempted murder, but it's no defense to attempted murder to say, well, you didn't get me that good,
right.
Can I throw a curveball you guys' way?
Yeah.
I want to see how you'd handle the situation if, let's say, there is a student who has a gun, right? Mm-hmm. And the student threatens somebody off school grounds with the gun and then goes onto school grounds with the gun. If somebody came over and attempted to kill that person to prevent them from creating another...
No.
We can't do that. You can't take the law into your own hands.
You're in exactly.
This heat of passion thing, this arose, I believe, out of a case where a husband walks in to his house and finds his wife in bed with another man, and then kills the man. And this was how we mitigate
and
murder.
that's why most of the heat of passion cases deal with spouses, and it's not even just spouses. You can't, for instance, you can't hear that someone has cheated on you. You have to be in the act of catching them or something.
But it's not limited to that.
But it's also quarrels. So which means obviously there's a fight or there's a scuffle or something.
It just has to be an intense emotion, and I think this is why a jury. Thank goodness for jury trials, because I think this is where we have, it's not just a video and a judge decides. A jury will put themselves into the defendant's shoes.
Well,
hopefully.
the thing is, court precedent has essentially set only certain areas. It's not just an intense emotion. A jury can essentially, in fact, a judge would not instruct on that, because court precedents has made it to where it's only actually been spouses or sudden quarrels that have taken place, and that's where they have allowed it.
Yeah. But that looked to me like a sudden quarrel, right?
No, it definitely was. But the issue is the cooling off period, like Shaka was talking about.
And I think, in this particular case, do I want this guy to go down for attempted murder? Absolutely not.
Right,
But
you don't.
But the danger of him not being charged and not being convicted is that people will start to take things in their own hand. And I think the reason we have these laws about the cooling off period is to avoid people from being vigilantes, essentially.
Right.
And so, because someone threatens me today, and I may not know their true intent, maybe they are threatening me, but they actually have no intent to follow out with killing me, and then I go tomorrow and kill them. If this case doesn't stand for not doing that, then we're going to have a problem in this country.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, of course.
Do you think the case would be the same had the arm not been severed? Because literally hitting somebody with a car could potentially murder him, but he was running away even though his arm was severed. If he had run away from the scene and then been arrested 3 days later, could he have still filed an attempted murder charge with the surveillance tape?
Yeah, it was the same.
Yeah.
As Shaka mentioned, the degree of injury is not the indicator. It's the intent and the instrument used.
Serious physical injury for attempted murder.
Yeah, serious bodily harm. When you take, for instance, it's the instrument as well.
Yeah, you don't need to have actually incurred the serious bodily harm. But
Intent
the person has to
create serious bodily injury.
Well,
and when you take an SUV and ram it over someone, I think that intent is definitely clear.
Unless he says I don't know how good of a defense this was. He was going back, to confront the guy. Probably not a good idea. And then when he saw the kid was about to shoot at him, he ducked and then inadvertently struck him.
So now you're talking about self-defense, and when you're talking about a self-defense argument, you cannot be the aggressor. You can't create the circumstance.
And also this kid walking around with a gun, and there was other people around. So we could say, well, he was trying to be a good guy and safeguard the other people.
Third parties, no, but yeah,
right.
it doesn't quite fit.
Yeah. All right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's no way around that one.
I didn't think so, but I put it. I thought I put it out there.
I agree with Shaka. I would hate to see this guy convicted over something like that. Yeah. But
and especially the kid
matter,
is not. What is he going to get? A slap on the wrist? He's 17 years old. He's a kid.
Well, he'll get more than a slap on the
wrist.
They
might charge him as an adult,
but get a story to tell.
You think?
But hopefully they plea this guy out and they figure something out that makes it, or the sentence is somehow not quite.
I mean,
grave.
we women have expensive shoes, but I don't think we kill each or rob each other over it. What the? I mean, this is. Yeah.
So you wouldn't rob nobody over some Louis Vuitton?
No. no, and no. I mean, part of me feels like justice in this case would be, bitch slapping the kid. Like, really, you're gonna?
I agree.
Hold somebody. Agree. I mean, what about
the true criminal in this case was a kid?
The psychological damage that has on somebody. If somebody pulled a gun on me over shoes, I mean, this kid better pay for therapy for life, because that is, I mean. Hopefully the kid gets sued with for intentional infliction of emotional distress.
Yeah, he can. Yeah, he can. Right.
All right. Okay. So another story that you might find outrageous. So have you taken out a student loan, a federal student loan? Yeah.
Yes,
what
too many.
Now, how do you feel if you back in 1987 took out a $1,500 loan, and then federal agents, 7 of them, come in fully equipped, knock down your door, and arrest you for this $1,500 that you owe to get you on a payment plan?
And these aren't just local police; these are U.S. Marshals who engaged in this.
Yeah, this is
insane. But my first thought was, it's a shame we don't treat all debt in this country like that, because I think we'd all make smart decisions getting credit cards, we'd all make smart decisions with our banking, but this story is ridiculous that they went through these great lengths to get this one guy. Now, if they start doing this for everybody, maybe it's
I mean, they're saying
that go to the top of the ladder.
So they've got 94 U.S. Marshals serving that exist in this country, right? Yeah. And they're usually doing big, important things like executing warrants on federal criminals and investigating domestic and international fugitive.
Right.
I mean, big, important things, right? And then we use them to collect debts
of $1,500. Yeah.
So apparently, this one guy, Paul Acker from Houston, this is his story, but he's not going to be the last person. Apparently, this is sort of a new plan to recover the federal government's money.
Back in the day, they had debtors' prison, and from my understanding, that never actually went away. It's just something that they haven't exercised. So this isn't foreign to our judicial system. We definitely had stuff, but and in fact, in debtors' prison, from my understanding, this was decades ago. but it was actually held in contempt, which would mean that there isn't a limit in which a time frame in which you can, you must be released.
Yeah, wow. So bankruptcy isn't one of those classes in law school that everybody takes. You can take it sort of as an elective if you're interested. So
Right.
I have not the first clue about bankruptcy, and I was under the impression that we did away with debtor's prison altogether.
We just stopped effectuating its use.
All right. So, I think that this is a ridiculous use of resources. I'm sure it cost the operation to arrest this guy probably cost taxpayers more than $1,500.
Where you sending seven marshals to arrest this guy for $1,500 of student loan debts when we should be relieving people of student loan debt?
Yeah.
And they took him in to arrange a payment plan. You could have give him guy a call.
Right?
Like knocking the door down,
not,
this was not a polite, entry. This was like coming in full gear and the whole thing. I think it's, ridiculous.
But we talked about creating circumstances that could lead to, and I'm just tying this back to police shootings, that could actually escalate and lead to a police shooting in this situation. $1,500 student debt. You send seven marshals.
Yeah, so what if this guy had a gun and he feels like his house is being invaded? Yeah. He has a right to defend himself in his own home, and he starts shooting at marshals.
Or he didn't have a gun. He had something that looked like a gun.
Oh, dear God. Yeah.
Right.
This is ridiculous. Especially, I thought it was a good comeback when you suggested, why aren't we doing this on the people on Wall Street who have committed crimes that have cost us
We're still
more.
recovering today,
billions,
and we're talking about billions, right?
Yeah, where are the marshals going in to get those guys?
Exactly.
That would be a much more productive use of our resources.
They've all signed agreements that say they're inoculated from prosecution.
Right. Yeah. All right. Hate to end on that note, but it looks like that's where we're ending today. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Justice is Served. Don't forget to come back with us next week. And in the meantime, if there's a story that we should cover or comment that you have, please let us know. Tweet at me, at Chelsea Galicia.
At me, Shaka Strong.
And just BJ Abron.
Oh, wow. Bye, guys.
From executives Kevin Undergaro, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us. info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I am the official voice of Black Hollywood Live, Scipio, Instagram me at KingXOBay. Thanks for tuning in.
Hollywood Redefined.
The views expressed here are those of the host only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.